into this week's edition of RNN Talks right here on Racing News Now. Thank you so much for joining me. As always, I'm your host, Garth Allen. And this RNN Talks is going to be a little different than past RNN Talks. There is no interview tonight. We have had an interviewee on for each RNN Talks so far since the inception of RNN Talks. I don't plan on that changing in the future. We will generally have someone to talk to on each of these RNN Talks. But this week I thought we'd do something a little bit different. It's been a couple weeks ago now, but the 2019 nominees for the 2019 class for the NASCAR Hall of Fame were announced. The 5 new nominees to go along with the 15 existing nominees from the past few years. So I thought we'd do something a little different today. We'll go through all 20 of the nominees, and then I will give you my 5 picks for the 2019 class of the Hall of Fame if I were on the voting committee. And we'll just kind of go through biographically who these guys are. We'll pick 5 of them. You guys can play along at home. Leave down in the comments who you think should be in the Hall if you disagree with me. And as usual, we will have our predictions for this weekend. NASCAR once again in action this weekend. The Monster Energy NASCAR Cup Series and the Camping World Truck Series are at Martinsville this weekend, as well as Formula One starting their season this weekend in Australia. So, without further ado, let's get into the 2019 nominees for the NASCAR Hall of Fame. These are in no real particular order. We're going to start off first with the 5 new nominees for this year, and then the other 15 are just in alphabetical order. So we'll start off with Harry Gant. Competed in the NASCAR Cup Series 1973 to 1994. Was known by many nicknames. Handsome Harry for one, the Bandit, due to him driving the Skull Bandit for such a long time in the Cup Series. Mr. September, after he won 4 consecutive Cup races and 2 Xfinity, or what is now Xfinity races in September 1991, as well as High Groove Harry. The expression high, wide, and handsome, that came from Harry Gant. From running the high line. That was kind of his signature thing at most tracks, was to run the high line. 474 starts in the NASCAR Cup Series, 18 wins, 17 poles for Mr. Harry Gant. Jeff Gordon, the next guy on the list, and I don't think it will be any surprise if Jeff Gordon gets in. In fact, I'm wondering if Jeff Gordon might just not be a unanimous pick. I would be very surprised if Jeff weren't a unanimous pick. Putting biases aside, I know there's a lot of people that don't like Jeff Gordon. But if you put your biases aside and look at it from an unbiased perspective, just look at the numbers Jeff Gordon put down in his career, driving full-time 1993 to 2015, 805 starts in what is now the Monster Energy NASCAR Cup Series, 93 wins. That puts him 3rd on the all-time list, 81 poles. And that's on top of 4 championships, 1995, 97, 98, and 2001. I don't think there's any question that Jeff Gordon gets in this year, given that he's right up there in the conversation as one of the greatest of all time in NASCAR. So the question is not, does he get in? The question is he unanimous? I think he should be. We'll see if that actually happens. Next on the list, we'll do these 2 together because they were kind of inseparable for their NASCAR careers. John Holman and Ralph Moody. Holman Moody Racing, very famous from 1957 to 1973. They won 2 championships as car owners in 1968 and 1969. 525 starts in the NASCAR Cup Series, 96 wins as owners, and 83 poles for John Holman and Ralph Moody. Very successful careers for them. Holman Moody Racing, one of the most famous names in terms of race teams in the history of NASCAR. So they would not be surprising to me to get in the Hall eventually. I'm not sure about this year, but definitely I think they are deserving to get into the Hall of Fame. And then your final new nominee for this year is Kirk Shelmerdine. Became most famous as a crew chief for Dale Earnhardt, winning 4 of Earnhardt's championships in 1986, 87, 1990, and 1991. Competed as a crew chief from 1977 to 1992 with 460 starts, 46 wins, and 15 poles. He stepped out of the crew chief role in 92 to pursue a driving career, which is what he really had always wanted to do. Unfortunately, wasn't as successful in that. Only made 41 starts as a driver across all 3 of NASCAR's National Series, but definitely more well-known as a crew chief is Kirk Shelmerdine. Now, the 15 returning nominees from past years. We'll start off with Davey Allison, Hueytown, Alabama's Davey Allison of the Alabama gang. One of these guys that I think his career was cut very short. He definitely had a lot of years ahead of him, and who knows what he could have done. He was only 32 when he got involved in the helicopter accident that took his life in July of 1993, and only competed in 7.5 full-time seasons in the NASCAR Cup Series. 191 starts for Davey Allison, 19 wins, 14 poles. One of those wins, of course, being the 1988 Daytona 500. No, scratch that. The 1992 Daytona 500. The 88 Daytona 500 was the one he finished second to his father, Bobby Allison. So very storied career for Davey Allison, albeit very short. If you just look at his career in the years that he had, a very successful career, and that's why he is nominated for the Hall of Fame. Buddy Baker, the Gentle Giant. Unfortunately, Buddy Baker is another one we lost fairly recently, August of 2015, to cancer. Buddy Baker, obviously known as the Gentle Giant because he was 6'6", but one of the nicest guys you would ever meet. Competed in NASCAR from 1959 to 1992, 699 career starts, 19 wins, and 38 poles. His career spanned even further than the driver's seat. Even after he got out of the driver's seat, became an analyst for TNN and CBS on TV, and then later moved on to co-host a couple different shows on Sirius XM NASCAR Radio. So very, very storied career in racing for Buddy Baker. Unfortunately, we did lose him a couple years ago, but that does not take anything away from the amazing career that Buddy Baker had. Red Farmer, the next guy on the list, also a driver, also part of the Hueytown, Alabama gang. 4 championships in his career, and he's one of these guys that just raced as much as he possibly could, raced on every short track he possibly could. And the problem with that is we don't really know exactly how many races Red Farmer actually won, because it was a lot of short tracks that may not necessarily have kept the best records. The guesstimate is that he won somewhere north of 700 races in his career, not just in NASCAR, but in every race that he competed in, from the local level all the way up to what is now the NASCAR Cup Series. He did win 4 NASCAR championships, 3 in the late model sportsman division, 3 years in a row, 1969, 70, and 71, as well as a modified championship in 1956. Ray Fox, the next non-driver on the list, known as a lot of things in his career. Engine builder, car owner, race official. He wore a lot of hats. Competed as an owner from 1962 to 1974. Exactly 200 starts for Mr. Ray Fox, 14 wins as an owner, 16 poles. One of the few guys to come from the New England area in that time period, 60s and 70s. Not a lot of guys venturing into NASCAR from anywhere except for really the Deep South in that time period. Ray Fox, I think, really a pioneer in that respect, and really one of the best engine builders in the history of NASCAR. Then next up we have the coach, Joe Gibbs, obviously an owner, still currently an owner in NASCAR Cup Series and in the Xfinity Series. Has been around since 1992 on the NASCAR side. Before that, obviously, a coach for the Washington Redskins, winning 3 Super Bowls. But his NASCAR success has been just as good, if not better. North of 2,000 starts already in his NASCAR career as an owner, 148 wins and 113 poles, as well as 4 championships thus far. Bobby Labonte in 2000, Tony Stewart 2002 and 2005, and Kyle Busch in 2016. 2 Daytona 500 victories, 5 Brickyard 400 victories. The list goes on and on. Joe Gibbs has had an incredible career in NASCAR as an owner. Harry Hyde, crew chief Harry Hyde, next on the list. Harry Hyde was such a good crew chief, they made a movie about him. Have you ever seen Days of Thunder? The crew chief in that movie, Harry Hogg, that's Harry Hyde. Harry Hyde was just a masterful crew chief. One of the best in the history of NASCAR. I mean, I would put him right up there with the current day great crew chiefs of Chad Knaus, Rodney Childers, those kind of guys. Harry Hyde is right up there in that conversation as one of the best crew chiefs in the history of NASCAR. Competed 1966 to 1933, 56 wins as a crew chief, and 88 poles. Alan Kulwicki, the next guy on the list, another one of those that his career unfortunately was cut short at the age of 38. Also 1993, also a helicopter accident. A couple months before Davey Allison's helicopter crash. Ironically, the year after he had won his first championship in 1992. Had an amazing career. Owner-driver, the last owner-driver to win a championship until Tony Stewart did it in 2011. Only competed 7.5 seasons in the Cup Series with 207 starts, only 5 wins. But the fact that he has a championship, I think, kind of outweighs the fact that he only had 5 wins. 24 poles as well for Alan Kulwicki. He started the Polish victory lap, the reverse lap that winners sometimes still do when they win a race. That was Alan Kulwicki's thing. He kind of invented that, if you will, because he has a Polish heritage. And he said he wanted to do something special for his first win, so he drove a lap in reverse. Called it the Polish victory lap, and it stuck. The funny thing was, I heard a story about he was worried NASCAR wasn't gonna like it if he did that, if he drove a lap in reverse, and it was exactly the opposite. NASCAR loved it when he did that, which doesn't surprise me. NASCAR has always loved when their drivers do something unique and show some personality. So very, very good career for Mr. Alan Kulwicki, even if it was a lot shorter than it should have been. Bobby Labonte, the next guy on the list, the 2000 Cup Series champion, as well as the 1991, what was then the Busch Series champion. Competed full-time in the Cup Series 1993 to 2016. Very long career, 729 starts, 21 wins, 26 poles. Very good numbers for the younger of the Labonte brothers, and definitely someone deserving of being in the Hall of Fame. Herschel Mcgriff next on the list. And Herschel Mcgriff is the first guy we've had on this list to really showcase drivers that were successful, but not necessarily in the Cup Series. Herschel Mcgriff really made a name in what is now the K&N Pro Series West, kind of the Western Regional Series below the Truck Series. There's K&N East and K&N West. He made his name really in the Pro Series West, winning 37 races between 1971 and 2012, 43 poles, running his last race at Sonoma Raceway in 2012 in the K&N Pro Series West at the age of 84. Herschel Mcgriff, a very long, storied career in NASCAR. Roger Penske, the next guy on the list. And what can you say about Roger Penske that hasn't been said? Roger Penske, obviously known as the captain, admittedly not as much success in NASCAR as he's had in other forms of motorsports, but still very successful in NASCAR. Has fielded a car in NASCAR since 1972. Just shy of 2,000 starts at this point, 107 wins, 123 poles, 2 Daytona 500 victories with Ryan Newman in 2008, Joey Logano in 2015, 1 Cup Series championship with Brad Keselowski in 2012. I don't know what you can say about Roger Penske. Just the man has meant so much not only to NASCAR, but to almost every form of motorsport in the world. When you think motorsports, Roger Penske is one of the first names that comes to your mind. And while admittedly he hasn't had the success yet in NASCAR, that I noticed that I said yet, because I believe he will have that same level of success when all is said and done. As he has had in other forms of motorsports, I still believe he is deserving of being in the NASCAR Hall of Fame. It's amazing how active he still is, not just with NASCAR, not just with IndyCar, with all of his motorsports. He's 80 years old now. It's fascinating to me that at 80 years young, basically, for Roger Penske, he's still kicking it just like he was 40, 50 years ago. It's crazy. Larry Phillips, the next guy on this list, another one showcasing someone that is successful not in the Cup Series. Larry Phillips got a reputation in the Wheelin' All-American Weekly Series. Nobody expected to win when Larry Phillips showed up at these races. Everybody was basically competing for second, or they thought they were, every time Larry Phillips showed up for one of these races. And Larry Phillips is another one that we don't know exactly how many races he won, because he did so many of these little local races that, again, these local tracks, not the greatest sometimes with keeping records. We're not sure of an exact number of races Larry Phillips won. Competed in the Weekly Series 1989 to 2001, 308 starts, officially 226 wins. But the estimate by a former crew chief of Larry Phillips is that he won somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000 races in his career, which is just a staggering number if you think about it. How many races that you would have to enter with the winning percentage that most guys have, the ratio of races they won to races they lost. How many races you would have to enter to actually win over 100 races or over 1,000 races? It's just mind-boggling to me. And obviously, that is why Larry Phillips is Hall of Fame material. Jack Roush, the final owner on this list, has been competing in NASCAR since 1988. Over 3,500 starts as an owner, 137 wins, 89 poles. Started off as a drag racing owner, then came to NASCAR in 1988 with Mark Martin as his driver, and the rest is history. 2 championships as a car owner, 2003 and 2004 with Matt Kenseth and Kurt Busch. Ricky Rudd, the next guy on the list, Chesapeake, Virginia's Ricky Rudd, competed in the NASCAR Cup Series 1975 to 2007. 906 starts. Was NASCAR's Ironman for the longest time with 788 consecutive starts until Jeff Gordon broke that record in 2015. 23 wins for Mr. Rudd and 29 starts. There's no other way to describe Ricky Rudd other than tough as nails. This is the same Ricky Rudd that got a concussion one week, came back the next week. Not only did he run the race, he taped his eyes open so he could see. That was the level of dedication that Ricky Rudd had. And it was the reason that he was the Ironman for so long and had those 788 career starts, because he refused to miss a race, no matter what the conditions were. Mike Stefanik, our final driver on the list, and another one that was successful outside of the Cup Series. Mike Stefanik made a name in the Whelen Modified Series from 1985 to 2014. 450 starts, 74 wins, and 48 poles. One of the greatest modified drivers of all time. Just made a name up in the Northeast. Originally from Coventry, Rhode Island, and just never really apparently felt the need to leave New England. Stayed in the Modified Series where he was very successful and made a very good career out of it. Finally, the last guy on the list for nominees for the 2019 class into the NASCAR Hall of Fame, Waddell Wilson, crew chief and engine builder. One of the most famous crew chiefs and engine builders in the history of NASCAR. Competed from 1979 to 1995 as a crew chief, 287 starts, 22 wins, 32 poles. Again, one of the greatest crew chiefs of all time. As we see, only 287 starts, and not a lot of starts, but was very successful the races that he was a crew chief, and that's why when you think of famous crew chiefs throughout the history of NASCAR, Waddell Wilson is on that list. And he's up there with being one of the greatest crew chiefs of all time. All right, so that's all 20 of our nominees for the 2019 class for the NASCAR Hall of Fame. Now I will give you my 5 choices if I were on the voting committee to go into the NASCAR Hall of Fame. And I want you to leave your 5 picks in the comments as well. I would love to know who you think deserves to be in the NASCAR Hall of Fame. I want to know who you agree with of my choices, who you disagree with. And if you disagree with any of my choices, if you have someone different, let me know why. I would love to hear why you think someone different than who I think deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. So, first and foremost, obviously I think Jeff Gordon goes in this year. I don't think there's any question about it. Like I said earlier, I think the only question is, does he go in unanimously? Second driver on my ballot, or second guy on my ballot, is a driver, is Buddy Baker. I think the Gentle Giant definitely deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. Third on my list, and I've actually changed this up a little bit from what I had planned on making this list prior to the show. I've changed this a little bit. Third on my list, Harry Hyde was always on my list. Harry Hyde is next on the list here. Like I said before, one of the greatest crew chiefs in the history of NASCAR. I think definitely deserves to go into the Hall of Fame this year. Fourth on my list, Roger Penske. Just with what Roger Penske has meant to motorsports as a whole and in NASCAR, I don't think there's any question that Roger Penske goes into the Hall of Fame. All right, so we have two drivers, an owner, and a crew chief. My final pick to go into the Hall of Fame this year, I think, has got to be Larry Phillips. No, he never made it past the local ranks, but I don't think he felt the need to. Larry Phillips was so dominant at the local ranks, in the weekly series, in the Wheel and All-American series. I think just on those stats alone, and the fact that it's estimated that he won between 1,000 and 2,000 races, I think Larry Phillips definitely deserves to go into the NASCAR Hall of Fame this year, in 2019. So technically next year. All right, so to recap my 5 choices to go into the 2019 class for the NASCAR Hall of Fame: Jeff Gordon, Buddy Baker, Harry Hyde, Roger Penske, and Larry Phillips. Leave your 5 down in the comments. Like I said, I want to know who you think should go into the Hall of Fame. Anybody that you have differently than me, please give me an explanation, because I would love to know why any of these guys, all these guys obviously deserve to be in the Hall of Fame, but I want to hear your reasoning why you would pick someone different than I picked. So that's our Hall of Fame talk for tonight. Now we will go into our predictions. We'll start off with the F1 race for this weekend. Round number 1 for the 2018 campaign, the Australian Grand Prix. The tough thing about first races for a season is you don't really know who is going to be fast this season. You know who was fast last season, but there's always some surprises. So, given that, I'm going to admittedly go with the easy choice for this weekend, and then from there we'll go from there. We'll see who's fast, and hopefully I can have some more informed picks after this weekend. But I'm going to go with defending champion Lewis Hamilton to win in Australia. He was extremely fast all of last season, and I don't think there's any question he's going to be fast again this season. So we'll say Lewis Hamilton wins the Australian Grand Prix early Sunday morning, if you're here in the States. All right, now moving on to the NASCAR action for this weekend from the Martinsville Speedway. 2 races. Xfinity is off this weekend. Trucks are back. Cup is in action as well. So we'll start off with the truck race, the 20th annual Alpha Energy Solutions 250. And I know there's going to be a lot of people happy about this. No Cup regulars in this field. So that being said, I had a hard time with this one because I think there's a few guys that have a legitimate shot at this. There's a few guys that are usually strong at Martinsville, but I'm going to go with Noah Gragson. He won there in the fall for his first win in the Truck Series. I think he comes back and repeats and starts off his championship run for this season. Noah Gragson wins the Alpha Energy Solutions 250 on Saturday from the Martinsville Speedway. Now we'll move on to the Monster Energy NASCAR Cup Series, the 69th annual. Wow, this race has been going on for a while. 69th annual STP 500. And I'm going with my gut on this one. I haven't gone with my gut a lot recently, and it has burned me. There's been and you've seen this. You've seen me go, I'm this close to picking this guy, but I'm going to go with this guy. And it ends up being the guy that I said, I'm so close to picking this guy. So I'm just going to go with my gut this time. I'm going to go with my gut. Chase Elliott wins the STP 500 on Sunday for his first career victory, first of 2018. He was so close to winning at Martinsville in the fall until the whole debacle with Denny Hamlin. I think Chase Elliott gets redemption this time around, gets his first victory, and propels him to a fantastic season as we go forward. Chase Elliott wins the STP 500 on Sunday from the Martinsville Speedway. So I think that will do it for tonight's edition of RNN Talks. Thank you as always for joining me. It is much appreciated. If you haven't already, subscribe to Racing News Now so you don't miss a thing. Like the video, it is much appreciated. And don't forget to support us on Patreon. That's patreon.com/racingnewsnow. It is much appreciated, and it helps us continue to give you quality content all the way into the future. So at that, this has been RNN Talks. I'm Garth Allen for Racing News Now.